We're moving into some new type history stuff. So this week is sort of focusing on sans serifs. So we're starting off with a font called Accident Grotesque. And this font is pretty interesting because if you look at it, it looks very industrial. It looks very new, very current. You'll notice that it looks very similar to Helvetica, actually. What's interesting about this font is if you look at the date in which it was created, it's over 100 years old, almost like 125 years old. That's a pretty interesting outcome, that this font that looks so current, so contemporary, is over 100 years old. And it actually is the inspiration for Helvetica. So I know a lot of students like Helvetica and they like to talk about it and they like to use it. Remember I said, try to avoid Helvetica and experiment with other sans serifs only for the sake of learning to use other sans serifs or become familiar with it. There's nothing wrong with Helvetica. It's just that I think that you should explore other avenues from a typographical standpoint if you can. Well, so here's Accident Grotesque, and it actually has a really large family. So this is a cool font to sort of work with because there's just so many variants of it. It's a super family. I want to say that there's probably over 60 variants of it. You can start off with this, check it out. There's a little link here that gives you the historical background on Accidents Grotesque. There's also a video that I'd like you guys to watch. This is a gentleman named Matthew Carter. He's a type freak like some of the other people we've been looking at, and I think it's a really interesting lecture in his life and involvement with typography. A little bit more slower pace, but I think it's really informative and interesting. We're going to lesson 15, so this is our agenda. Here's Helvetica. So since we were talking about it, this was designed by Max Meidinger. It was also, there was some input by Edward Hoffman. It was designed in the mid 20th century. It's considered a Swiss modern design. It's very much in line with what's called the international style of graphic design or the international style of typography. It's also referred to as the Swiss style. So if people refer to the Swiss style, the international style is the same thing. They're sort of like terms or descriptors that mean the same thing, and designers might use one or the other. But it's a period of design where functionality was really the focus and emphasis, and clean aesthetics, clean lines, sort of a modern look and feel. So a lot of sans serifs or fonts that didn't have decorative elements were used during that period. And you'll notice that a lot of our current design language actually echoes or borrows from that from a corporate standpoint. With that being said, you can read a little bit about Helvetica through this link. There's actually a documentary that was released in 2007 specifically about Helvetica. It's literally called that. It's called Helvetica. I don't know if any of you have seen it or heard about it. Interesting documentary. I think that if you do a Google search, you might be able to find a Vimeo version of it to watch for free. Or I think there might be other resources where you can watch it for free. It's not for free on YouTube, at least not that I could find. But there are a couple of excerpts that I found on YouTube that I figured that I would share with you. And these are three designers that I really respect, and I think that you should respect. And I think it's kind of interesting to hear some of the stories that they tell sort of revolving around the font Helvetica, its importance and sort of their perspectives and view on it. So the three designers are Massimo Vignelli, who I consider he's my favorite designer. He's sort of like the person that I would aspire to be. So there's a little 5-minute segment with him speaking about Helvetica. This is Wim Krauw, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Wim next week. He's also a mid-century designer. He's also a type developer, almost an experimental type developer. His emphasis is in typography, grid systems, and design systems. So really, really interesting person, one of my favorites. And so he has a little 5-minute bit in the movie as well. And then last but not least, there's Eric Spiekermann. He tends to talk at the end of the video. It's only like a minute or two, but it's still kind of fun to hear him talk about himself and the font, sort of his points of view on it. And obviously we know Eric Spiekermann pretty well since we read his book. This is what I'd like you to focus on. I didn't really collect a lot of links to these topics because I figured that you could search it on your own. I know that Helvetica is really popular. You can do a Google search and find all sorts of information. Max Meidinger, there's a little bit of stuff on him. I think that this is really sort of his opus. This is what he's known for. But there are some other information and examples of his work if you try to do a thorough search. There's a couple of links here about sans serifs and once again, accident grotesque. I'd like you to read Why Fonts Matter, chapters 5 and 6. And here's that video again by Matthew Carter on his life in typography. Check this stuff out, watch it at your leisure, and hopefully you'll find it informative for personal enlightenment. And I hope that you check it out because you want to learn about typography and these topics and subjects that we're learning about.